Hello everyone and welcome back to Mysterious Murmurs. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story name: The Cradle That Rocks Itself. The first time the cradle moved on its own, Claire thought it was a trick of the light. She had been standing in the doorway of the nursery, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, the baby monitor still buzzing softly in her hand. The room was dim, the soft blue glow of the nightlight painting shadows on the walls. In the center of the room, the antique wooden cradle, handed down for generations in her husband's family, was rocking gently back and forth. The baby wasn't in it. A chill ran up her spine. She stepped forward, her heartbeat slow and heavy in her ears. The cradle creaked, the old wooden slats groaning under their own weight, moving as if some invisible hand was pushing it. Claire stopped beside it. She stared down into the empty space where her newborn daughter, Lily, should have been. A rustling noise came from the hallway. She turned sharply, her breath catching. "James?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The hallway beyond was dark, the house silent in that deep, suffocating way it got after midnight. She could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the wind rattling against the window. But nothing else. Then, a giggle. Tough breath. A child's laugh. Claire's blood turned cold. She spun back to the cradle. It had stopped rocking. The nursery seemed darker now, the nightlight's glow swallowed by something unseen. The air smelled stale, dusty, like old wood left to rot. She took a slow step back. The giggle came again, closer this time. Claire's breath hitched. She turned and ran. Down the hallway, past the darkened rooms, down the stairs, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. She burst into the master bedroom, her heart hammering. James was still asleep, his arm draped over the empty space beside him where she had been. "James," she hissed, shaking his shoulder. He groaned, peeling one eye open. "What?" "The cradle," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was moving. And I heard something. A laugh." James blinked at her, groggy. Then he sighed, rubbing his face. "Claire, you're dreaming." "I'm not," she snapped. "I saw it. It was..." James sat up, running a hand through his messy hair. "It's an old cradle, babe. Maybe it just settled or something. Wood expands, shifts. You know how this house is." She shook her head. "That wasn't it. I heard something." James exhaled, rubbing his temples. But Claire followed him upstairs, her breath still coming fast. The nursery door was still open, just as she had left it. James stepped inside first, scratching his bare chest as he approached the cradle. He gave it a light push. It rocked, creaking like an old floorboard. "See," he said. "Nothing weird. Just a cradle doing cradle things." Claire didn't respond, because something had changed. The room felt off. She looked at the cradle again. The blankets inside were neatly folded, but she hadn't folded them. And then she noticed the dust. A thick layer of dust had settled on the cradle's wooden railings, undisturbed except for one thing: tiny handprints. Her stomach twisted. James followed her gaze. His face paled. "What the hell?" Then the baby monitor crackled. A voice came through. Not Lily's cry. Not static. A whisper. "Mama," Claire screamed. James lunged for the monitor, clicking it off, his face tight with fear. Jesus Christ, he breathed. But Claire was already backing away, shaking her head, because Lily wasn't old enough to speak. And the voice on the monitor hadn't belonged to her. James threw the baby monitor onto the floor like it had burned him. The plastic casing cracked, the screen flickering before going dark. Claire clutched her arms around herself, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out beneath her. "Mama." That whisper was still curling around her brain, threading itself into the deep places of her mind. It hadn't been Lily's voice. It hadn't been a voice she recognized at all. It had been too old, too knowing. James turned to her, his face pale. "We're leaving." No. She could only nod. He grabbed Lily from the crib, cradling her against his chest, and they ran, down the stairs, out the front door, into the cold night air. The wind bit at Claire's bare skin, but she barely felt it. All she could think about was the whisper, the handprints, the unseen presence in that room. James fumbled with the car keys, cursing under his breath, before finally getting the door open. He strapped Lily into the car seat with trembling hands. Claire slid into the passenger seat, her whole body buzzing with adrenaline. As James backed out of the driveway, Claire turned to look at the house. The nursery window was dark, but she swore she saw something standing there. A small figure, watching. They checked into a motel 20 miles out of town. James paced the small room, running his hands through his hair while Claire sat on the bed, rocking Lily gently in her arms. She was still asleep, her tiny mouth parted, unaware of the terror that had driven her parents out of their home. James finally stopped pacing. "We're not going back." Claire looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean we sell the house. We get rid of it. Whatever's in there, it can stay there." She wanted to agree. She wanted to say yes, absolutely, let's never go back. But something inside her twisted. Because deep down, she knew it wasn't done with them yet. And then the phone rang. James and Claire both jumped. The motel room phone sat on the nightstand, its old-fashioned receiver vibrating against the cheap wood. Claire stared at it. The motel clerk had never called when they checked in. No one knew they were here. James moved first. Slowly, he picked up the phone, bringing it to his ear. "Hello." Silence. Then, the same whisper. "Mama." James dropped the phone. The dial tone buzzed in the silence, filling the room like an open wound. Claire held Lily tighter. James turned to her, his eyes wide, his voice barely above a whisper. "It knows where we are." The motel room felt smaller now. The walls seemed to press in, the air too thick, too wrong. James stood frozen, staring at the phone like it might start screaming at him. Claire clutched Lily against her chest, feeling the rapid rise and fall of the baby's tiny breaths. "James," she whispered. He didn't move. "James," she said again, louder this time. His eyes snapped to hers. There was something hollow in them, something stripped away. "We need to leave," he murmured. Claire swallowed hard. "And go where?" He had no answer. The phone sat dead on the nightstand, the dial tone finally cutting off, leaving only a silence that listened. Claire glanced at the door. The motel was old, cheap, the kind of place where the deadbolt barely fit into the frame. If something wanted to get in, she doubted it would have much trouble. James grabbed the car keys. "We're driving until the sun comes up." Claire nodded, not arguing. She stood, cradling Lily in one arm as she grabbed the diaper bag. They moved quickly, silently. James cracked the door open and peered out. The parking lot was empty. The only light came from the buzzing neon motel sign, casting everything in a sickly red glow. They stepped outside, locking the door behind them even though they both knew it didn't matter. The night was too quiet. Not even the sound of crickets. No wind. Just the soft hum of streetlights. Claire's skin crawled. James opened the car door, but before Claire could get inside, she heard it. A slow, rhythmic creaking. Like old wood moving. Her stomach dropped. She turned her head toward their motel window. And froze. The cradle was in the room. It sat there, rocking itself. The blankets inside it shifted, as though something unseen had just settled into them. Then, the tiny handprints began appearing on the glass. One by one. Too many of them. Claire gasped, backing away so fast she nearly tripped. James grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the car. Go, go, go. She barely had time to strap Lily in before James peeled out of the lot, the tires screeching against the pavement. She didn't look back. She didn't want to look back. But she could feel it. Something was still watching them. They drove through the night, past empty highways and abandoned gas stations, stopping only once at dawn to fill the tank. Neither of them spoke. Claire fed Lily in the back seat, her hands still shaking. James stood by the car, staring at the horizon, his face blank. We can't run from it, Claire finally said. James turned to her, his voice hollow. Then what the hell do we do? She looked down at Lily, who gurgled softly, her little fingers curling around Claire's own. We find out what it wants, she whispered. James inhaled sharply. And if it wants her? Claire's throat went dry. She didn't have an answer. But deep inside, in the place she didn't want to acknowledge, she already knew. The cradle hadn't been rocking for nothing. Something had been waiting. And now it wanted to come home. The road stretched out before them, endless and empty, swallowed by the morning mist. Claire kept her eyes on Lily, who had fallen back into an easy, innocent sleep. James gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. They were running, but deep down, Claire knew they couldn't outrun this. James, she said finally, her voice quiet. He didn't look at her. No. Whatever you're thinking, no. We need to go back. James slammed his foot on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop on the side of the road, dust rising around them. He turned to her, his jaw tight. Are you insane? Claire met his eyes. It followed us. You know it did. James exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. Yeah, I know. And that's exactly why we don't go back. We can't keep running forever. James let out a bitter laugh. Why the hell not? We drive until we find a new house, a new town, a new... And it finds us there too. Silence. Claire reached out, placing a hand over his. We have to end this, James. We have to know what it is and why it's here. James swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed. Then, after a long, long moment, he put the car in gear and turned around. They were going home. The house looked different in the daylight, but not in a comforting way. It looked like something waiting. The nursery window was still dark, the curtains still drawn. James turned off the engine but didn't move. Neither did Claire. Lily stirred in her car seat, making a soft sound, half a coo, half a sigh. Claire forced herself to open the door. They stepped inside together. The house smelled stale, like wood and dust and something else. Something old. The baby monitor was still on the floor where James had dropped it. The screen was dark now. Claire's breath hitched as she looked toward the staircase. The air felt heavier here. She could feel something, a presence, watching, waiting. The nursery door was open. The cradle was rocking. Claire's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She stepped forward. James grabbed her wrist. Claire, but she shook him off. She had to see. She had to know. She moved to the cradle, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The blankets inside were smooth. And then, as she reached out, a voice came from the baby monitor, even though it was still lying on the floor, unplugged. "You took her from me." Claire froze. A whisper. A woman's voice. "So, morning." James stumbled back, his face pale. The air in the room shifted. The light dimmed. The walls seemed to breathe. Then, footsteps. Coming from the hallway. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. Claire turned just in time to see a shadow pass by the doorway. A shape. A woman. James sucked in a sharp breath. Claire stepped back. Her body screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. The cradle lurched. Not a gentle rock this time. It slammed against the wooden floor. Twice. Then the voice came again. "Where is my baby?" Claire's blood turned to ice. Because this thing, whatever it was, it wasn't after Lily. It was looking for a child long, long gone. Claire's throat tightened. Her mind raced. And then, suddenly, she understood. The cradle. The handprints. The voice. It wasn't here to take. It was here because something had been taken from it. A mother. Searching. But James grabbed Claire's hand. "We need to go." Claire shook her head. No. She turned back to the cradle, to the unseen force lingering in the room. And she whispered, "Who was she?" For a moment, there was nothing. The rocking stopped. The room grew cold. And the voice whispered, low and aching, "Eleanor." Claire shivered. "Who took your baby, Eleanor?" Silence. And then a child's cry. Soft, distant. It echoed through the house like it was coming from somewhere else. Somewhere buried. Forgotten. James gritted his teeth. Claire, stop. But Claire couldn't stop. Because now she understood the truth. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a curse. And if they didn't find out what had happened to Eleanor's baby, they would never be free. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have a tale of your own or a legend you'd like us to explore? Let us know. You might just hear it next. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Because here the darkness is always waiting just for you.